Hi there. Today, welcome to week 13 in this class. You're on the home stretch. You're definitely almost there. Excuse my appearance and my cough drop. I am fighting off a cold. So who knows how long this video will be able to last before the next sneezing fit ensues. But I wanted to just give you a little introduction to this week's topic. We're talking about quantitative data analysis. Now, this is exciting for me because I am a quantitative researcher. It might, though, not be met with the same level of excitement by all of you. I can tell you that if you have already taken statistics, this stuff will be a review for you. You have heard all of this before if you have taken statistics. If you haven't taken statistics, fear not. This is a great introduction for you to statistics. So read this chapter carefully. Read it over and over again. It tells you enough information about what you need to know in terms of methodology and quantitative analysis to be able to begin to think about your own proposal without getting too detailed and too in-depth to where you're going to freak out and run screaming from the room if quantitative methodology isn't quite up your alley. The important things I want to point out to you about quantitative analysis is different statistical procedures, different types of analyses do different things. Correlational analyses identify relationship or an association between two variables, but they do not indicate causality. When you're doing t-tests or ANOVAs, chi-squares, MANOVAs, what you're really interested in is in group differences. Excuse me. Sorry about that. A student needing advising. Okay, where was I? Talking about quantitative data. So your MANOVAs, your t-tests, your ANOVAs are looking at group differences. I don't want people to talk about things in causal terms unless you are absolutely positive that the way you are looking at a question and the type of analysis you are doing can actually provide evidence for causality. It's very rare. And so I want you to keep that in mind when you're writing. It's very important that you use the right language to describe not only your questions, but your hypotheses. For example, if I'm studying child care quality and I want to look at teacher training, teacher education, levels of formal education, I might find a relationship between higher levels of education and higher levels of quality. But that is a correlation, that is a relationship, it's an association. I can't say that that higher level of formal education caused higher quality because I have not looked at all the variables. And I didn't do a test that would determine that. I just looked to see if there was an association, meaning did these two things happen at the same time. There's also a lot of correlational evidence that people with larger feet sizes have higher IQs. Does that mean that having a bigger foot causes a higher IQ? Absolutely not. It's just a relationship. And if you have a big enough sample, you can find a relationship between almost any two variables, which is why effect size becomes important when we're talking about different quantitative procedures, but I'm not going to get into that with you right now. So, as I said, read this chapter very carefully. It's going to talk to you about developing code categories, which is what we do when we have qualitative data that we want to analyze quantitatively, in case you're trying to figure out what that's all about. It also talks to you about how to create a code book, which is important when you're doing analysis in a computer. You need to know what a 1 equals, and a 2 equals, and a 3 equals in that database. As you write your methodology, I want you to pay careful attention to the samples that I've put up in Blackboard because I'm very particular about how methodology is written. I really like to know that you have planned thoroughly. I want to know, here's your sampling system. I don't want to just hear, I will go get 200 people. I want to know how you're going to get those 200 people. And I want it to be a plan that makes sense for what you're trying to study. And you can use the sampling chapter to help you write that piece. When it comes to instrumentation, I don't want you to just say I'm going to use the Early Childhood Environment Rating Scale. I want you to tell me what the measure is, what the items look like on that measure, what the validity and reliability information are about that measure that the people who developed it have already tested and run. I want to know what items look like, and I want to know how you're going to use those items. So how will you operationalize your variables? If you are looking at global quality, well, where does that come from? Is it an average of all the subscales? I want to know how you're coming up with the things you're going to put in the analyses. And then I like to see a distinct plan of analysis section. So you'd have like your intro, your review of the literature, your method, and your plan of analysis. Some people combine the plan and the method together. And if you do if that's how your advisor will ask you to do it, that's okay. Just make sure that it's very clear to me and distinct that this is now your plan of analysis. And what that means is, okay, you got this sample, you had them fill out your questionnaire or whatever. Now how are you going to analyze this? So that needs to lead back to your research questions. And if you're struggling with this and this isn't making sense to you, please go look at the samples that I have for you up in Blackboard, because those each have a plan. Well, the proposal itself has a plan of analysis. It's not the best plan of analysis I've ever seen. It got revised a great deal before I actually finished it up. But the ones that are written as a final write-up of a study, the plan of analysis is simply the results before you have the results. So it's question 1 is this. Here's hypothesis 1 for that question. So let's say I'm interested in quality. I'm interested in teacher education related to quality. So I ask them all what their formal level of education is. I also ask them how many training hours they have each year. And then I assess for global quality using the Eckers. Let's just say that's what I've done. Well, research question 1 is formal level of education of teachers associated with global quality of the entire program. Hypothesis 1, teachers with higher levels of formal education will work in programs exhibiting higher global quality ratings. That's a hypothesis. And then how will I test that hypothesis? I'll tell what I'll do. A Pearson's product moment correlation will be computed with teachers' level of formal education and global quality scores. You know, because you've already explained to me how you're getting those in your method section. A correlation of point whatever you decide, and your book helps you figure out which ones are good, but correlation significant at 0.05 will provide evidence for this hypothesis. Okay, next thing, hypothesis 2. Teachers with more informal training hours will work in programs with higher levels of quality. And I might do the same type of analysis. So if that can kind of help you see, I have given my methodology, which is how I'm going to get everything, how my sample, my procedure, the instruments I will use, and how I will operationalize. What are my independent variables, and where do I get those from? Item 3 on the questionnaire, where I ask what your formal education level is. That is how I'm going to operationalize formal education. It's a categorical variable, etc., etc. And then how do I get my dependent variables, and what are those? What am I measuring? And then what are my questions? How am I answering my questions? And what are the hypotheses under that question? And so this chapter and the chapter previous will be very influential to you in writing that section of your methodology, because that's what you're going to be. That's going to be the meat of your paper, really. And so the chapter goes on to talk about frequency distribution, central tendencies, modes, medians, standard deviation, continuous versus discrete variables, which are all things that are very familiar to you if you've already taken statistics. If you haven't, it'll be new, and you might have to read this chapter more than one time. But again, it's very well written, very laid out. If you have questions about any of these types of analyses, please feel free to put a question on the Q&A, and I will answer them. I can do video or something on the discussion board. I'm going to have to stop now because I'm out of time. YouTube will only let me use 10 minutes posting. But I think that's all I had to say for this week. So be sure to read this chapter very carefully, especially if your proposal will be quantitative in nature. And if you have any questions about what I've just outlined in terms of the formatting of the methodology, please put something on the boards and let me know so I can explain it to you clearly, because I really want you to feel confident going into this home stretch of your paper. Okay? Thanks. Have a great week.